aka xsl:choose. What? Okay, so we've seen how XSL programs work. You have your XML quote-unquote database, and then you have the XSL style sheet, which is the program that produces the HTML. And it's a little bit odd that we put in our database the name of the one program that processes our database. Okay, so we saw how to do value of, grab something out of the database. We saw how to do for each loops, loop over a bunch of nodes. Awesome. A couple of other basic things. The if-else if statement. So scroll down here in the notes. And so if-else if is actually called choose. And we can see in the example code here that we get a choose tag, and within the choose tag we're going to have a whole bunch of when tags. And then the actual test will be done with, or the actual condition will be inside the test attribute of this when tag. Okay, so yeah, when you need to use it, you'll go look it up and figure out exactly how to do it again. Let's just look at an example of looking at this. So here I clicked on the choose.xml, and we got the 7 wonders of the ancient world down in this table. Of course, when I do a view source, what am I going to see? I'm only going to see the XML file, the database with all the information, but not the program that generated it. Okay, for that we want to look at the choose.xsl, and here we can go ahead and see that like we've already seen, we're going to have a for each loop, for each of the wonders. Inside there we'll make a table row. This whole thing is inside a table tag, of course. Yeah, and then for everything in the row we went ahead and had a TD with the name. And then we're going to go ahead and I haven't really talked about the angle bracket at. I'll introduce that now. When we looked at this before, we saw that things had their name and then their name in Greek. Some things had Hanging Gardens of Babylon and then empty parentheses because there wasn't in the database, there wasn't a Greek name. So it had open paren and then nothing for the Greek name and then close paren. That looked pretty bad. So yeah, we can go ahead and fix that. So here's what we're going to do. After the name, we're going to have an XSL choose, and here are 3 different things. When there's a name, or put it this way, out of all the name tags, filter out, that's what square brackets is going to mean, and then look for an attribute language that is equal to Greek. So, and we'll talk about this again on XPath, but when I say name, I'm actually looking at, hey, chose all the name nodes within the wonder that I'm currently looping over. Okay, so name chooses all the name nodes. It returns an entire node set. Out of the node set, filter that down. Give me only the ones that meet the following criterion inside the square brackets. And again, that criterion is, hey, look for an attribute named language and see if it's equal to Greek. Okay. If there is such a thing, then this node set is non-empty. Okay, so we'll call that trueish. And what will we do? We'll go ahead and have a BR tag, an open paren, and then value of, and we'll grab that one, well, we'll grab that, we'll select that particular node set, which hopefully has just one thing in it. Okay. What if, so that was if there was a name that was English. What if there's a name that was just, if there was a Greek language. What if there's a language that is just non-English? Okay, well then we go ahead and do this, and we'll go ahead and grab that non-English name as well. And I think I put one in just as an example. I put in a German phrase there in the database. And so we can see that, yeah, we're choosing Greek and handling it this way. We're choosing non-English and handling it this way. The Greek gets handled by the first one. Now I do the same thing in both cases, so it's a little bit moot. And then finally, there's an else clause, which is xsl:"otherwise." I wanted to do nothing in that case, so I made it an empty tag. Of course, if you did want to do something there, inside the body of that tag, you would include your default handler. So, okay, so that's the XSL choose thing here. The other thing we want to go ahead and do is, if there was no height given, rather than show it as 0, which is what we did before, we can go ahead and do a choose with one branch being, hey, height not equal to 0. That's my condition. If the height is non-zero, then I can include this. Otherwise, that. Now, that's a little bit, brings up an interesting little side issue of xslt. What happens if I mention a node that doesn't exist at all? Okay, which is actually what happened for the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Well, let's look at the database. I'm not sure, actually. Let's go ahead and look at the database, look for Babylon, look for its height. I'm sorry, so the height there was actually explicitly listed as 0. We'll come back and talk about design choices and say that's maybe not the right design choice. The author of the textbook that we're using for this went ahead and did that in, and I'm not happy with that design choice. But nonetheless, if that was what was in there, then we could handle it with code. If height is not 0, give the height. Otherwise, use the word unknown. Okay, so that's the if-else-if, xsl:"choose with a bunch of XSL when clauses and finally a default xsl:"otherwise. Do you always need that xsl:"otherwise? If you're really sure you've handled every situation, you don't need it. Even if you did, I would go ahead and have an otherwise, just like I do in my if-else-if statements for other languages. If I have a bunch of statements that I think cover all the branches, I will add an else statement at the very end and put something like "should not reach here." Okay, and I will do that in xslt as well. Sometimes I have some if-else-if statements, and then the very last option is everything else that I didn't capture so far, and it would be really hard to sort of name that explicitly and tedious. In that case, yeah, I'll use the otherwise to actually handle that last case where all the branches I didn't talk about. But main gist, if you know you've handled all the cases, if it's easy to write the code that handles every single case, include the otherwise and then put an error message in. In Java, I'd probably throw an exception, or most languages. In XSLT, I'd probably just put in bold, nobody should see this. And hopefully my testers will let me know that, hey, I got something wrong. I thought I'd handle all the cases and I didn't. I can fix my code. Okay. That's if-else-if. You're like, hey, Barlin, what about an if statement? What if I want to go ahead and do something if height was non-zero and nothing otherwise? Is there an if without an else? And the answer is, yeah, there is. I'll call it the one-armed if. And I'm not a fan of one-armed ifs overall, but there is an XSL:"if. It doesn't have an else. If you want the else, you need to use the XSL:"choose. Okay, so I'll say nothing more than XSL:"if, and there is no XSL:"else that pairs with it. So, okay, you can look at the example in the notes. Awesome. I'll cut this short here. Next video we'll talk about two tags that act kind of weird because they actually try to use information that comes from their surrounding node context. And that will be sorting and attributes. Thanks.